What we have here is a learning experience. Okay, on this vehicle, the oil balance procedures that are in the book give the explanation that they show you turning a compressor upside down. You have your high side and low side. Ports open, they tell you to spin the compressor to try to get the oil out. Now, Denso is one of the best manufacturers that I've dealt with, and not everybody gets to make their own parts or rebuild them or remanufacture them. Sometimes they outsource. But this is literature from Denso from probably about 30 years ago. And they're still reprinting this today with no modifications or updates. I like you guys, Denso, but when you're gonna do somebody else's compressor, update your literature. So if I was a technician, I would have just over-oiled this vehicle grossly. So here's the situation. This compressor comes with the full refrigerant charge for this vehicle, which I think was 5 ounces in this Dodge Dakota, unless you had rear air conditioning, and then it was 8 ounces. So we're gonna say this has 5 ounces in it, brand new. This is the oil that came out of the old compressor. Now, the person who worked on this vehicle told me he thinks the AC was low on charge, and I could kind of confirm that. He thought there was a little leak at the seam up here, some oil, no big deal, it's just a little bit. And so he called me up and asked me for some instructions of what to do, and I told him, well, read the book, and he read me what was in the book, and I said, oh no, those are old instructions from the 70s and 80s, from Denso, from old-fashioned compressors in a bygone era back in the Stone Age, but it's still being reprinted. And so on this manufacturer, which is Sandin, and there is, so you can see the label on it, this has a crankcase. You see that bolt right there? And this bolt right here. So this has a sump, and this actually holds a reservoir of oil of a couple ounces in the case of the oil. Just like an engine has an engine pan, or an old Frigidaire A6 compressor, and you had that pregnant belly end about held 6 ounces of oil. Or if you know about the York or Tecumsehs that had 6 ounces of oil in a reservoir with an oil pickup and everything like that, this is the same way. You drain the oil from here, not from the ports. So this technician, he opened the ports on the new one, and he said, this is all the oil I got out of the new compressor. Oh no, this was the old compressor, sorry. New compressor. This is all the oil, but yet then this is filled with 5 ounces of oil. And when he rotated it and turned it upside down, that's it. That's not 5 ounces. Why? Because what the instructions did not tell him on this compressor, that you have to remove this plug and drain out all the oil in the system. So he replaced the compressor. He drained out the oil out of the old one. There's not even, I would say there's maybe 10 milliliters, 10 cc's of oil. That's it. Came out of the old compressor. And then I shortly arrived to go, and I said, well, what about the oil, the sump pump? Remove the plug. He goes, what plug? So we proceeded over to his toolbox, and we opened up the plug. We turned it upside down. Almost no oil, just drops of oil came out of there. Where is the oil? There was no great oil leak or nothing like that. Where is the oil? So once again, I've explained this on other videos. As the refrigerant system gets low, the mass of the refrigerant, of liquid refrigerant, goes down. The refrigerant is an excellent solvent. It binds with the PAG oil that's in here. It comes back as a vapor. It swipes out and steals a little bit of the oil. It pushes it out the discharge. But because there's not a lot of mass, and through the small tubes of the condenser, there's a lot of velocity. So it's easy to flow the oil right through the condenser in an aerosol spray, and it makes it out. And because the size of the tube is small, there's a high velocity of refrigerant. So it scrapes it off the walls of the refrigerant oil that would have, under a low velocity, cling to the sides of the walls. The high velocity scrapes it off there, keeps on going down the system. It makes it to an expansion valve. You go through a small orifice, and then you expand to a large tube. Immediately the velocity falls. And because this is not a full system, there's not enough mass of refrigerant traveling at a high velocity to keep the oil miscible or in suspension mixed with the refrigerant. So because of the lower mass of refrigerant going through the larger tubes of the evaporator, the oil droplets, the oil mist, drops out of suspension and falls onto the sides of the tubes and to the bottom of the large diameter pipe and just stays there, while the vapor refrigerant travels over it, comes through the evaporator, comes back to the compressor as a vapor, not containing oil anymore. It's staying back in the evaporator. It makes its trip back to suction side, coming back to suction, going back in as a vapor, but now it's a clean vapor. Well, let's not use the word clean. It's an oilless, a very low percentage of oil vapor because the oil stayed in the evaporator, coming back to the compressor. Now it's an excellent solvent. But you have the mechanism and the pistons and everything like that, and you have oil getting on the cylinder walls, so you have an empathy of a refrigerant that is low on oil. So it's a beautiful solvent and it wants to suck up oil. So as soon as it gets into the system and it swipes on the cylinder walls and any moving part that is coated with oil, the vapor refrigerant picks up some of that oil again and discharges it out the discharge with the refrigerant, and it makes that process again and dumps a little bit more oil back, and it keeps building up. So when you take off a compressor on a system that ran low, you get this situation where you went to measure the oil and you go, oh my God, it's out of oil, we need to add more oil. But no, it's all in the evaporator. And when he went to check and balance oil, he only got this because we're only checking the discharge. So you end up with an over-oiled system. And of course I have the wrench on here because I was twisting it to make sure there was no oil, twisting it, spinning it, making sure there's no oil in the cylinders. I'm doing the vacuum right now. Several months ago he had a problem with this before, and I guess there was oil and he replaced the receiver dryer, and so did not change it this time because it's only a few months old. And this time threw on a compressor. You could hear this is starting to sound like throwing on parts. I won't get into that here. So he did this and called me up to come out, and this is when I definitely opened up his book for his instructions on this compressor and found out this means nothing. And this is something that you have to be taught and you have to learn. That is not in reading literature. Very little literature has this fact inside of it, unless you were in commercial. If you went to a commercial HVAC school, you learned this about oil logging and oil being transferred to evaporators and low lines and low lines that are oversized and oil falling out. So when you go to school, at a legitimate school, not a quickie 9-month, I paid $30,000 to become a mechanic school. When you went to an HVAC school that is 2.5 years long, not a slam bam, and hopefully you were able to get a day job, so you're combining your experience during the day with your book learning that you learn in a class, theory, and a little tiny bit of on hands. Your mind could put together the combination of what you learn in class with what you learn on hands-on, and you get that aha moment where the light bulb comes on, instead of being a brain dead person sitting in the seat reading a book and just having lectures thrown at you. Having the combination of hands-on and book learning work. Doing one or the other works a lot slower, and a lot of mistakes get made and a lot of parts get cost. Owners lose money because of technicians with a lower education level who never learned correctly. Customers lose money because of technicians who falsely diagnose things or break things, and then they get charged for parts that they shouldn't have got charged for in the first place because no education. So getting back to it, oil balance, and why on this particular type of compressor that book is worthless, even though it came with the manufacturer's box and rebuilt by them. That is enough for this lecture. I got to get out of here. There's work to be done. See you guys later. Hope you learned something. Any comments, leave some comments. I'll answer. Thank you.